Well, the 56th legislature began the 2017 session this week with lawmakers staring into the face of a nearly $870 million budget hole. To address that shortfall and put funding of state services on a more sound footing, Governor Mary Fallin suggests a major overhaul of the state's tax structure, an idea that promises to be a tough sell for lawmakers.
In her State of the State address to open the legislative session, Governor Mary Fallin called on lawmakers to enact what she called a series of bold reforms to stabilize state government. Among her proposals are a plan to increase the cigarette tax by $1.50 a pack, along with increased taxes on gasoline and diesel fuels, and phasing in pay raises for teachers. But the biggest change proposed by the governor is a move to expand the state's sales tax to a host of services that are currently exempt.
So by expanding the sales tax base, this allows us to eliminate the state sales tax on groceries and the corporate income tax, and it may be possible in the future to further lower the sales tax rate.
According to the governor's executive budget, expanding the sales tax to services that are currently exempt would generate $839.7 million in new recurring revenue, while eliminating the sales tax on groceries would cost the state $234.7 million, and ending the corporate income tax would result in another $140.2 million loss. While cities and towns would still be able to collect the sales tax on groceries under the governor's plan, Senate President Pro Tem Mike Schultz says the potential for losing that source of revenue makes a lot of communities nervous.
In a lot of your rural communities, the only sales tax base is that grocery store or convenience store. So even if you spread it out to these other areas, they don't have the sales tax base. They don't have those retail vendors there to make it up. So there is still a lot of concern about that.
And Senate Education Committee Vice Chair Ron Sharp is concerned what the loss of revenue from the grocery tax would mean to efforts to increase teacher pay.
If we're going to look at the grocery tax, which is about $250 to $300 million, would be the state's share, that would be a $2,000 to $3,000 raise for every teacher in the state of Oklahoma. We could very well take that grocery tax, if we're, instead of doing away with it, let's use that as the funding formula for the teacher's salary.
Oklahoma Policy Institute Executive Director David Blatt says expanding Oklahoma's tax base is not a new idea.
But as soon as you start identifying which services you want to tax, whether that's going to be services on home building, on oil fields, on installation and repair services, on haircuts, on car washes, then you're going to see a lot of people, whether it's business organizations, lobbyists, ordinary citizens, are going to say, whoa, hold on, we don't want to tax that.
While the governor declined to give a list of services that could be taxed, State Finance Secretary Preston Dorflinger admitted very few would be exempt.
That list is exhaustive. We plan to work with the legislature to determine what services those include. But basically, if it's a service that you pay for today, that would be included.
The governor's plan will need support from both Republicans and Democrats, and that's likely to be a challenge. House Minority Leader Scott Inman has been critical of previous plans by the governor to cut income taxes while giving tax breaks to the oil and gas industry.
If they come to us again with another cigarette tax, we're willing to consider it if they're willing to admit their mistakes and put a broad-based tax structure reform package on the table. What we don't want to do is continue to cut revenues or cut taxes from the wealthy folks and raise haircut taxes and oil change taxes and things like that.
The cigarette tax and fuel tax increases would require a 3/4 vote of both the House and Senate to pass. On the other hand, Dorflinger believes extending the sales tax to services now exempt could be accomplished with a simple majority vote.
We're not increasing the tax. And I, again, would suggest to you that future legislatures could have the opportunity, and we'll leave it to them, to possibly reduce the overall sales tax rate.
That's not the consensus from legislative leaders.
If we're going to add items to the list of things that we collect sales tax to, that is going to require the 75% threshold of a new tax.
Former State Finance Director Alexander Holmes, now a professor of economics at the University of Oklahoma, believes any legislation to broaden the tax base that doesn't get a supermajority of votes in both chambers would wind up in court.
Because somebody would challenge it, so that whatever revenues they might raise, it would be tardy in arriving simply because of the legal challenge.
And Schultz says that puts the governor's plan on shaky footing.
The 75% threshold is going to make it that's a pretty tall hurdle to get over